Good day to everyone. Today is the 4th of El, 2026. I want to talk about this as part of our Holocaust series, second generation Holocaust survivor. That's myself and many others. Our parents, many of us in the Jewish world, were survivors. My father was a survivor from the Romanian Holocaust camps in Shargorod, and my mother was a survivor running away in Poland from the Nazis. And as I said in the last podcast, that I'm named after my grandfather, my mother's real father, who was shot, I believe, September 13th or 14th, 1939, just, 2 weeks or so, whatever, after the war started. And at that time, my grandmother and great-grandmother took the family, the two children, and an aunt, and just ran because my great-grandmother's husband was already killed in a village not far from Warsaw. It's called Krasnoshilts, still called Krasnoshilts. I was there, and I told you that story, so we won't repeat it. So when they saw that they lost the great-grandfather, my great-grandfather, and lost my grandfather, my grandmother, who was a very smart, feisty lady, she told everyone, "We're running, we're going," and they ran towards Bialystok. And from there, they went to the Kremlin, and they got out because the border closed, I think, September 17th between Poland and Russia, because Russia invaded, and they got out before. That's the way the dates seem to me. But today, I want to talk a little bit about the memories that my mother and grandmother shared, which were not much. And when you're young, whether it's a child or even a young teenager, you don't have the smarts to ask. We didn't know to ask. In many Holocaust families, the issues of the Holocaust were never spoken about. And if they were spoken about, it was a word here, a word there. And in my family, it was that way as well. But I did hear certain things, and I'll share them with you just to understand, again, to understand what's going on. My mother of blessed memory, Mrs. Miriam Dalfin, would say she has this image of living in one room, her parents, her grandmother, grandparents, in one little room, and things were cozy, and this was in a place called Makov Maziec, which is outside of Warsaw, about 20 kilometers or so. I later interviewed, and it's on my YouTube channel, two individuals. There should be 100 or 101 today. Hopefully they're alive still, living in Ramat Gan, Israel, Eretz Yisrael, which came from that city. You should listen to those. They are real survivors, and they grew up in Makov, and they remember the sheikh, the rabbi, the yeshiva, the bezdin, the Zionists, everything. So my mother grew up. My mother was born in 1936. And she grew up until the war broke out. They ran away in 1939. That was her home. So she was three and a half before they ran away. The aura, the ambiance of warmth and togetherness was so palpable in her consciousness that she shared that with us, with us children, with me. And I share it with you. In other words, she would say we didn't have much. There wasn't lots of food and lots of comforts. Although my grandmother, Hinda, Freda, was a businesswoman. And my understanding is that she had a tailor shop in Warsaw. That means she would travel from Makov, Mazietz, I guess every day to Warsaw. And I'm talking about 1936, 37, 38. And I'm thinking about it. There was no speed trains then or fast cars. It was probably a 2-hour ride each way. And she did it. In general, her husband, Chaim Yaakov Borenstein, the family were tailors. I know this from one of these Makov people that's 100 years plus, who told me that he knew, I guess, a cousin of my father, of my grandfather's, whose name was Fivish Borenstein. And he said that they were tailors. He even remembered where the tailor shop was in Makov. In other words, not my grandmother's tailor shop in Warsaw, in Varsha, but the tailor shop that other cousins had in the local city in Makov. So that was, when I heard that, that was a wonderful testimony from someone who remembered part of my grandfather's family. And he told me more things. But going back to my mother's feelings that she shared pre-war, she also spoke about the religiosity of the Jews at the time. Now, I want to explain this. Many Yidden at the time were falling away from observant Judaism. The beards of the men came off. The yarmulkes were not seen as they walked in the street outside of the home, but they kept Shabbos and they kept kosher. And the women went to the mikveh before having relations with their husbands. This is called Taras HaMishpacha, family purity. In other words, the 3 R's of Yiddishkeit, of Judaism, Shabbos, Kashrus, and Taras HaMishpacha, they did. This is my understanding from what my mother told me. And I know this to be true because later when my mother and her family moved to Costa Rica after the war, they were either the only family or one of the 2 families that had a kosher home. And when Mishulachim, fundraisers for yeshivas in America and Eretz Yisrael came, they ate by my grandparents, in my mother's home. They didn't trust anybody else. Where did that come from? It came from the shtetl. But yet, I venture to say that my grandfather didn't have a beard. I venture to say that he was more on what you would call the modern side if you looked at him. But there was a commitment to Shabbos, a commitment to the most important credos of Yiddishkeit, of Judaism. And that's a very important lesson for us today. Even if one is not ready or not willing to accept all of the 613 mitzvahs and to follow everything, and by the way, who can do everything? Who does everything? We're talking about acceptance of everything. Even if you're not ready, accept upon yourself the 3 basic mitzvahs. Keeping Shabbos, that means no telephones on Shabbos and no opening lights, turning on lights. No smoking cigarettes, which is not good for your health anyway. No cell phones, no computers. Keep Shabbos, even if you don't go to shul. Keep the Shabbos. And then there is kashrus, kosher, to buy kosher meat if you eat meat, to buy kosher products. The oil should be kosher, the fish should be kosher, the cheese should be kosher. And then there is, of course, family purity. The sanctity of a family is the relationship of the husband and wife vis-a-vis the laws of the mikveh, immersing in a ritual bath as a way of the home being holy. So my mother told me over and over, I remember, because, growing up, you heard, you read, there was modernity in Poland, in that whole region. And the youth were, in a sense, rebelling. And my mother made a point to say that there was rebellion amongst the youth, but amongst the generation that was older, her parents and grandparents, that wasn't the case. Yes, her parents, you might say, weren't as religious as the grandparents. My great-grandmother, Fega Nechama Ogin, it's my mother's grandmother. I have a picture of her, and you see that she's wearing a sheitel, not a tichel, a wig back in the day. And it's very tznius, it's very modest. No openings, no short sleeves. You see a very, very religious, holy woman. But she's my great-grandmother. So she's from the 1880s, 90s, right? That time, coming into the 19th to the 20th century. Then you see her daughter is a little more modern. But they kept the basics. And this is something else that when I say that they didn't share much, but now, in hindsight, as an older person, I think about the things that she did share, and they're so valuable. They're so valuable, not just for myself, they're valuable for everybody. And I want to conclude today's podcast that although I don't know much about my real grandfather, as I said, I grew up with my step-grandfather, who to me is my grandfather for all practical purposes. So loving and kind and teaching me, as I shared in the first podcast. And if you didn't listen to it, I encourage you to listen to it. So although I don't know many details about his life, the fact that I carry his name, Chaim Yaakov, and by the way, I have a document of his marriage. I think I might have mentioned this in the last podcast, that substantiates his name, Chaim Yaakov. It substantiates the rabbi who married them. I told you this. So although I don't know many details, he is alive in me. Not just because I carry his name, which of course is also true. It's because the celebration of Yiddishkeit, of Judaism, as I accepted it upon myself and was trained in it and continue to teach it to my children, grandchildren, and future generations, is bringing back his ancestors to the way they were before the modernity started to come into Poland and in Europe. So, in a sense, it is my name and who I am and who we are, the survivors who continue the life of those that were murdered. So as sad as it is, and as difficult as it is for a second-generation survivor to understand and to relate to the atrocities, to the horror, and to the sadness that it brings, simultaneously, there's a positive side to it. We get a chance to bring their souls, their neshamas, to a place of holiness. And every act that I do, and every act that you do as a second generation survivor, or a third or fourth generation, for the souls of those that have passed, you keep them alive. They're not buried. Of course they're buried. Of course they were murdered. And we'll never understand, and we shouldn't understand. But at the same time, we know that God is good and God is loving. Why this had to be, we don't know. But one thing we do know is that we can make a difference. Have a great day. Celebrate life. L'chaim. And we'll see you in our next podcast. Please tell your friends about this. It's available on my YouTube channel, Rabbi Dalfin, and also on Spotify, so you can listen to it in the car. And may God bless you with only goodness, holiness, and everyone should have a ksiva v'achsima teva, may you be written and inscribed in the book of life. A shana tova mesukah, a good sweet year, this upcoming year, 5787, Tov Shin Pei Zayin. All the best. Hatzlacha. Good luck.